The 1980s gave us some of the greatest films ever made. Everybody talks about the classic films from then, everybody knows about them, but there's another tier of 80s films that deserve so much more love than it gets. Not necessarily hidden gems, not forgotten films. These are movies that you probably know of, that you've probably seen or at least heard about, that have real audiences and fan bases that love them, but for some reason or another, they got buried under the bigger, louder, more iconic films of the 1980s. These films kind of got robbed. They deserved better. And today, I have 10 of them. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, now before we get into it, I want to talk about what this list is and isn't real quick, what it means to be on this list. Underrated doesn't really mean nobody has seen it. I kind of touched on that already. It's not necessarily a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. We're going to get to that in another video. Underrated means that it just didn't get seen the way it should. It was critically underrated. Audiences didn't pay it attention. It got lost under the shuffle of the big, great films we remember. But these films deserve a reassessment. They deserved so much better than they got. Kicking us off, these aren't really ranked in any way, but starting us off here is one that might surprise you a little bit. It's 1985's Weird Science. You might, hey, what do you mean underrated? Well, Weird Science, in my opinion, is the best John Hughes film that he's made. That's it. It's number one. And I know exactly what you say. Like, how's that possible? There's The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller, all of these other films that he's made. Those films get discussed constantly in cinema discussions here on YouTube, everywhere else, anywhere that big decade lists appear, you hear about those films. You almost never hear about Weird Science unless it's in a problematic type of article. But here is an honest argument from a filmmaking standpoint about why this movie should be in the conversation. Every John Hughes teen film is grounded in real teenage anxiety. 16 Candles about being invisible and the younger kid, and Breakfast Club about being misunderstood and the different cliques, and Ferris Bueller about freedom, yada, yada, yada. Weird Science is the only John Hughes film that is pure, unbridled wish fulfillment for a teen, with no apology, no real cost, but it also is heartfelt and has a heartfelt message about learning what it means to be in a real relationship and growing up and having the real kind of love and relationship instead of just idolizing fantasy women or fantasy men in your dreams. And it does it through insane 80s logic, magic, all of that. This film is completely committed to its premise. It has such a good heart, but it doesn't hold back. Critics couldn't embrace it. They said that it wasn't anything serious, and now they say it's problematic. But this film is exactly what it's supposed to be. It teaches these boys through this woman, Lisa, that they create. It teaches them what it means to be a real man in a real loving relationship that isn't built on fantasy, but it does it in the most 80s way possible. That's why it's underrated compared to the other John Hughes films, but I think it's the best one that he did. All right, we're going to stay in 1985 for Better Off Dead. And listen, same year, completely different energy in most ways in this film. One of the most purely original movies of the entire decade, really. Savage Steve Holland is directing this movie, and he is out there with it. There's no doubt about that. John Cusack is Lane Meyer, a teenager whose girlfriend dumps him for the ski team captain and who spends the entire film trying to learn to ski the K-12 and trying to figure out exactly what he wants out of life. Better Off Dead is a difficult one to categorize because it's not really a raunchy comedy. It's not just a ski comedy. It's very different because it doesn't really know exactly what it is, and maybe that's part of the reason that it's underrated, because it's simultaneously a teen comedy, a raunchy comedy, a kind of a sex comedy, absurdist fantasy, a sports ski film, a coming-of-age story, and something that operates in a completely different tonal register from almost anything else released in 1985. It actually is a good double feature in a lot of ways with Weird Science. You got two foreign exchange students racing Lane for a burger in this. You got one kid wanting his $2. He's wanting his $2. John Cusack famously hated the film and refused to work with Savage Steve Holland again. He thought it was too weird. He was wrong. He definitely is most of the time. I've met him in person. He's definitely wrong. He has hot takes one way or the other. But Better Off Dead is completely committed to what it is, and it's something that Hollywood has lost the ability to make, but it got buried under so many iconic 80s comedies, raunchy 80s comedies, ski comedies from the 80s. From that decade, it got lost, but it is underrated and it deserves your attention. All right, now we're going to kind of shift just a little bit, something a little bit different here, and we're going to go to 1983 with something a bit darker from Disney. I am talking about Something Wicked, This Way Comes. Ray Bradbury adapting his own novel for the screenplay here, Jack Clayton directing, and you've got Jonathan Pryce as Mr. Dark, literally a stand-in for the devil, a bad guy in a literal black hat. What else do you want? He's an unsettling villain with a great performance. This film has so much atmosphere to it. The 80s blue lightning, weather vanes, small town, creepy atmosphere, autumnal atmosphere with leaves and wind blowing this and that, rain and storms, and a creepy carnival that comes to town, the pandemonium carnival that comes to town, with the October people who can make your deepest desires come true through the power of Mr. Dark. But everything comes with a price to it. And this film has all of that autumnal dread, the seasonal vibes. Jonathan Pryce, I just love him in this as Mr. Dark. Something Wicked This Way Comes got buried under its own production. It had a lot of production problems. The studio, Disney, didn't understand how to market it. People weren't patient with it, and it almost didn't get finished, but it is one of the best dark fantasy films ever made. It deserves so much more love, so much more recognition. It deserves a 4K restoration to let that autumnal atmosphere out into the world again. Check out Mr. Dark in his Pandemonium Carnival in Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now it's time for one. Listen, I do my research before I do these because I try not to repeat. If there's videos out there that have done something like this, I don't want to repeat those. I know a lot of movies. I dig in a lot of movies, and I can bring you things that people don't normally think about and present them in a different way. And I've seen a couple of lists that are similar to this, and the movie I'm about to talk about is, in my opinion, relatively bigger, but people forget this movie and no one ever talks about 1986's The Hitcher. This is Robert Harmon directing, and it's C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer. And Hauer in this movie is genuinely terrifying on-screen performance, and this is a road sort of thriller horror movie. A young man driving, C. Thomas Howell, driving across the desert, picks up a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker, John Ryder, is something that does not behave in a way human beings behave. And it never is explicitly said in this movie that he's any kind of demon or something supernatural, but man, it is heavily implied, and you can infer it from the film, and that just adds a whole other layer that makes it even more underrated and underappreciated for what it is, because this man cannot be escaped. He is like a force of supernatural nature that is coming after C. Thomas Howell and anything connected to him. The Hitcher really exists in this space between thriller and horror, but it occupies really both spaces. It's too grounded to be just a straight up like supernatural horror, but it's got too many elements and too many innuendos and feelings and vibes to be a straight up just road horror movie or road thriller movie. It has something for everyone. That quality between the two, maybe that's why it's underrated just a little bit. Audiences didn't know which world it inhabited, because I'm not sure we know which world Rutger Hauer's character inhabits in this movie. But both Hauer in this film deliver just extraordinary performances and stillness, the absolute menace that he is in this movie. Of course, the truck scene pulling things apart. I'm just going to leave that there. The Hitcher deserves to be discussed alongside other great villain performances and horror movies of the decade, and it almost never is The Hitcher. Now, the next one's going to surprise you a little bit because it's a Martin Scorsese movie. And you're like, how's Martin Scorsese? How's he got an underrated film? He does. He actually has a couple of them, an underseen film. This one kind of falls into both categories. It's 1985's After Hours. And this is one of those weird films that I didn't like it the first time I watched it. And then I bought it the 4K, and the more times I watch it, I actually like this film better the more times I watch it. And that maybe that'd be a video in and of itself right there. But between The King of Comedy and The Color of Money, Scorsese did a film unlike anything else he has ever really done, and it really gets ignored in most serious conversations about his films, and it shouldn't. You have Griffin Dunne as Paul Hackett, a mild-mannered, I think he's like a word processor in the film, who makes the mistake of going downtown for a date and spends the entire crazy, surreal, rain, neon-drenched night in an increasingly dangerous situation in Soho that is designed basically to punish him all night long. After Hours is Scorsese making really a Kafka film, a comedy that is escalating helplessness where every attempt to escape the situation makes it worse. Every person that he comes in contact with wants something different from him, and then that represents a new obstacle. It's a calamity of chain of events here. It's almost like if Noise is Off, if you've ever seen that, if that were a movie about one person over one night, it's just one thing escalating to another, but it feels hostile in a way that New York City in the 1980s could feel hostile and intimidating, but it has this beautiful cinematography with the rain and the neon nighttime scenes. Scorsese won the Best Director Award at Cannes in 1986 for this film, but it's almost never mentioned with his great films. And here's my argument as a filmmaker for After Hours, because I'm trying to sell you on it, because it's going to take more than one watch for most people. It's Scorsese's maybe most formally inventive film of the decade. The construction of how the nighttime escalates and how everything builds from one thing to another in each scene, it feels inevitable and predictable while you're watching, and it's just genuinely masterful. I think it's underrated, and the more I watch it, the more I appreciate it too. In the film, maybe it stops making sense to you at some point because it's like, just get the hell out of there, but he can't, and that's the whole point. What would you do in that situation? After Hours, underrated, underseen, one of the great comedies that never gets talked about by one of the greatest directors ever, After Hours. Next up, we really have the film that got me wanting to do this list because I just rediscovered it. I had not seen it in so many years. I got the Arrow 4K and I just fell in love with this movie. And then I realized so many people haven't seen it or they completely forgotten about Inner Space from 1987, and I could not love this movie more. You got Joe Dante directing, Steven Spielberg producing, and that ought to be enough for anybody right there. I mean, you're talking about the Gremlins guys, duo. I mean, the Joe Dante and Steven Spielberg. That should be enough. But then you got Dennis Quaid in this as a miniaturized test pilot who accidentally gets injected into a hypochondriac, Jack Putter, played by Martin Short. But they're not alone. That's an entertaining enough premise. You also have a young Meg Ryan in this movie. Inner Space got released in the summer of 1987, and you're talking about a summer that had Predator, RoboCop, The Untouchables, Lethal Weapon, Beverly Hills Cop 2. It's kind of easy to see how it might have gotten overlooked, underseen, and a little bit buried. So it could be great like summertime cinema, and getting through that is going to be difficult for anything, even Spielberg and Joe Dante. You're talking about some of the most legendary films of all time, and maybe this one doesn't rise to that level, but it is genuinely a good movie in an 80s time capsule, and heartwarming and fun and adventurous. Martin Short in this film is doing something extraordinary. His physical comedy in this is absolutely awesome. It did get an Academy Award for the effects in this that still hold up even under the 4K. They look great. Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan obviously had chemistry that was going to build. The practical effects, I love it all. Inner Space is the film that got robbed by its place in time, by its release date, because it had the misfortune of being released at about the same time as 10 of the most iconic and everlasting films ever made. That's why Inner Space got overlooked, but don't miss it. Check it out. Buy the 4K. I don't do physical media on here anymore, but this is the way to watch this movie. I promise you. Go get it. You can get it on Amazon. I'll try to put the link down there. That helps out the channel if you use it, but I don't even care about that. I just want you to see this movie the way it should be seen. Inner Space. I have fallen in love with this movie again, and you will too. Now it's time to get dark, or at least near dark, with 1987's Near Dark. Catherine Bigelow, before The Hurt Locker, before Zero Dark 30, before she became the first woman Academy Award-winning director, and blah, 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 blah. Near Dark. 1987, a drifter in rural Oklahoma falls in with a family of vampires who travel across the American Southwest killing to survive. And it is led by Lance Henriksen, a great cult film actor, but Bill Paxton, one of my favorites all time, stealing the show. And this film is simultaneously a vampire film, a Western, a noir, and a romance, and a brutal piece of like American Gothic horror. Near Dark is underrated for one specific and entirely unfair reason. Kind of along the same lines as Inner Space, it had the misfortune of coming out the same time as The Lost Boys. And listen, The Lost Boys is a great film. It's one of my favorites ever. It's like my second favorite vampire film probably of all time, behind Fright Night. Those two fight back and forth, but Near Dark is right there with them. Lost Boys is stylish, fun, entertaining, very 80s with the two Coreys, but Near Dark is much more serious, dark, intense, beautiful cinematography all throughout Near Dark, these sweeping nighttime landscapes and sunset landscapes. But the bar scene, Near Dark, Bill Paxton, the bar scene, that, just go look it up. If you haven't seen the movie, you just want to know something, go find that scene, because he is doing something so unhinged and completely committed in that scene. It will just rock your world. It is one of the great supporting performances in the history of horror cinema, is Bill Paxton in this movie as a vampire, and that scene steals the entire film, and for damn good reason. Catherine Bigelow proved with Near Dark that she could direct action and horror and genuine emotion all simultaneously, and that helped Hollywood take another look at her for bigger films. And over the decades, in the years, Near Dark has risen to the top for me as one of the best vampire films, but at the time, it was buried by huge, iconic films that hit right away. Don't miss it. Check out Near Dark. All right, now next up is one that's just a little more fun, right? But it is made by a director who for some reason had the misfortune of several of his films becoming cult hits later, but they were just underseen and forgotten at the time. This is one of them. It's 1986's Night of the Creeps by Fred Dekker. And I'll talk about this movie to anyone who will listen, because I think this has a little bit of everything from 80s horror that you love. Even a little comedy in it is basically what it is. It does something there that is difficult. It celebrates the entire history of B-movie horror, sci-fi, comedy, without like being a B-movie itself, in my opinion. Alien slugs come to Earth in 1959, and they're accidentally released on a college campus in 1986. So we got the 1950s in a sci-fi vibe, 1980s in a horror vibe, and Tom Atkins comes in. Thrill me, Detective Cameron, a detective with a tragic past who becomes the reluctant hero. He's like the first anti-hero in one of these type of movies, and he is going to take on this whole catastrophe. And the film is packed with references to horror cinema, cinema history, and it genuinely feels like a love letter to horror and sci-fi and horror sci-fi fans. Every character in Night of the Creeps is named after a horror director. Carpenter, Raimi, Romero, Decker. This film explicitly celebrates the horror genre that came before it with a great, fun self-awareness. I love it. It has a warmth and fun to it. Tom Atkins in this film, listen, he's just everything. The deadpan performances, the good news is your dates are here. The bad news is they're dead, and he means it ironically and not ironically at the same time. Night of the Creeps deserved much larger audience than it got. Fred Decker overall as a director deserved more of an audience than he got. This is one that is so much fun. I own 2 copies in 4K of this movie. If you haven't seen it, get it, watch it. This is the way to see it. You're one of those people now. Check it out. Now, this next one might surprise you because you're going to be like, wait, that movie, I know that movie. But 1988's They Live was not the movie that it is now when it came out. John Carpenter and Rowdy Roddy Piper, sunglasses that reveal the truth. And forever, I used to say this was my favorite Carpenter movie. Now, as I've gotten older, I still have to lean to Halloween and The Thing being the top 2, but then They Live is right there for me. And now part of that is a bias because I love Rowdy Roddy Piper so damn much. But this has the greatest, longest fight scene in cinema history. Absolutely exists for no narrative purpose other than to just be pure badass. They Live is about a drifter named Nada who discovers a pair of sunglasses that reveal what the world actually is, which is aliens disguised as humans who control society and thought through subliminal messages. And the advertising is overt underneath the surface, like obey, consume, do not question authority. John Carpenter made They Live as a direct political satire at the time of Reagan-era consumerism and media manipulation. The odd thing and the greatness of this film is over the years, it has drifted from being a criticism of on the right and Reaganomics and consumerism to being a criticism of the same thing in different ways on the left side of the spectrum. That is insane, masterful work from a master craftsman of Carpenter, something that can twist and change as the years and the people and the society changes. They Live does all that. He cast Rowdy Roddy Piper, professional wrestler, as the lead purposely because he's like a physical authority. But the most famous line in this movie was not written by Carpenter or anyone else. It was spoken in the moment by Rowdy Roddy Piper. I have come to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. He came up with it in the moment. One of the most famous lines here. This isn't underrated because it's genuinely funny. It's got something to say, but it doesn't offend anyone the way it says it because you can just watch it as a horror movie with monsters trying to take over the world too. So it's genuinely political. That started on one side and moved to the other, but you don't even have to watch it that way. That is genius on the next level that Hollywood today cannot understand. They cannot understand that sometimes art is propaganda, but propaganda can never be art. John Carpenter understood that. It's all in They Live, and for all those reasons, it is vastly underrated. All right, and at number 1 is one that you might be surprised here. It is 1981's Blowout, and this is just a damn good movie. Period. The end. But as we close it here, this is probably the most technically accomplished film, and probably some people would argue this is the greatest film on the list. I don't know if I'd go that far because I probably like other of these films better, but this is Brian De Palma at the top of his level. It's not even my favorite De Palma movie. There's another underrated film of his that I love the most, which is Body Double, that could easily be here. But here you got John Travolta turning in an incredible performance, one that later got him the role in Pulp Fiction as Jack Terry, a sound effects man for a low-budget horror film who's out collecting sound, ambient sound, and he records a blowout. And Nancy Allen plays in this as a call girl who witnesses a murder. John Lithgow is one of the great villains. He's super chilling in this movie, but it has some amazing cinematography. The looks behind the scenes in the film area with a sound man and all the sound equipment and editing, just super cool. Long sequences with split screens, specific visual language that De Palma developed across Dress to Kill and Sisters, and he kind of reached his full potential here. Something that I used in my film set in the 70s, Dark Road 79. I love that split screen and wipes. Blowout made very, very little money, very little noise in 1981 in the shadow of De Palma's more famous thrillers. But here's my assessment from a filmmaking standpoint. Blowout is one of probably the best American films of the 1980s, as far as just like a film, like a cinema. You know, it is there. It's not one of the best 10 thrillers, not one of the best 10 this or that. It's just a genuinely across the board, really solid ass film that a lot of people have never seen. It makes it underrated and underseen. If you haven't seen it, check it out. You can grab it on the Criterion Collection. I'm not sure where else you can find it. I'll try to link these down below if I can, because I genuinely want you all to watch and experience these movies, including Blowout. So there you go, 10 films. I got them all around here somewhere. One decade, crazy decade of the 1980s. A genuine argument that the 80s was consensus the best ever. It is. I'm doing my best years ever. The 80s, you could literally pick about any year from the 1980s and it would be one of the best years in cinema history. That decade is incredible, legendary. I am privileged to have lived through it. Weird Science, Better Off Dead, Something Wicked This Way Comes, The Hitcher, Blowout, They Live. All these films, Night of the Creeps, Near Dark, they deserve more than they got. They deserve more conversation. They deserve more views and an honest reassessment by anyone who skipped them or didn't like them the first time or hasn't ever seen them. Check them out. Drop your comments below. Let me know what 80s films you think are criminally underrated. Not hidden gems. I got hidden gems coming. That's a little bit different. But let me know, because I guarantee there'll be more where these came from. And if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, ring the bell so that you don't miss anything. Hit the hype button, because apparently that helps. If you'd like to hang around and be with us on our journey to 100,000 and beyond in subscribers, we're aiming for that by the end of the year. You want to support what we're doing to help make that possible, you can join my Patreon. The link is in the description of every video. You'll get your name in lights on every single video. Behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, 4K deep dives into films like this, physical media reviews, and so much more, and everything helps the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.